Johnny Quest is a science fiction adventure media franchise created by Doug Wildey for Hanna-Barbera. It revolves around the titular Johnny Quest, a boy who accompanies his scientist father on extraordinary adventures. The franchise started with the 1964-65 TV series of the same name, and has come to include two sequel television shows, and also some 2 TV films, and 3 video games. The first show only lasted like 26 episodes, but for Gen Xers, it may seem like a lot more, thanks to a series of sweet syndication deals, along with the clever remixing and packaging of the company's 1960s and 1970s shows. Hanna-Barbera cartoons remained in reruns for decades, allowing new generations to grow up watching Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones and Jabberjaw, which... Yes, no, because the only Jabberjaw I grew up with was the, song. That song's a bop.
Me and my friends get no respect. What does Scooby do that we neglect? We be putting all our foes in check.
For kids of the 80s, not a Saturday slipped past without several Hanna-Barbera shows, making their way into our eyeballs, often entirely by accident. Johnny Quest always seemed to make its way into my generation's cartoon rotation. The article is saying that, but no, I personally agree. I actually grew up watching Johnny Quest cartoons. So, yeah. And many viewers my age became very fond of the show's chintzy, stilted animation, thick line drawing style, and stock laser sound effects. The premise was the stuff of boys' adventure novels. Johnny Quest was an 11-year-old wonderkind who was skilled in martial arts, weapon use, and scuba diving, and he was the son of Dr. Benton Quest, played by Don Messick, a freelance scientist who often took jobs for the U.S. government investigating unusual acts of high-tech, malfeasance? That's a word? Johnny's mother, meanwhile, had died and his living guardian was Ray Spannon. There's nothing to indicate that Dr. Quest and Rhodes were boyfriends, though. I see you, Hanna-Barbera. No. They're lovers.
My fucking god. These bitches gay. Good for them. Good for them.
Joining the adventures was Johnny's 11-year-old brother, Hajid. I think I pronounced that correctly. And his pet dog Bandit, also voiced by Don Messick, which I'm not surprised about. The Quest family lives and operates out of Florida. Their arch nemesis, Dr. Zen, was voiced by Vic Perrin, perhaps best known as narrator to the opening for The Outer Limits. The show debuted on September 1964 and ran on a weekly basis until March of 1965, when it was canceled. The series did well with critics and even fetched pretty high ratings. Hanna-Barbera ultimately pulled the plug on the series because, well, it was expensive. I know you guys all assume that they probably canceled Johnny Quest because most Hanna-Barbera shows only run for 1 season, but this isn't really the case for that. But like many shows before, Johnny Quest didn't find a massive audience until it was in syndication. It often came packaged with other Hanna-Barbera series. Kids of the 80s can tell you that the show's reruns aired in the middle of giant animation blocks. So, it was seen time and time again for 2 straight decades. Johnny Quest also had the distinction of airing reruns on ABC, CBS, and NBC in its life. NBC makes sense because they were actually produced by Screen Gems, who produced I, Dream of Jeannie and the Monkees. Few other shows were broadcasted on all 3 networks. Johnny Quest took a lot of its visual cues from Milton Caniff's popular comic adventure newspaper strip, Terry and the Pilots, with Doug Wildey adding high-tech devices like speedboats and jetpacks. Back in 1986, Wildey was interviewed about Johnny Quest, an interview that has been preserved on a Johnny Quest fan site, and he revealed that he was initially hired by Hanna-Barbera to design characters for a TV adaptation of the radio drama Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy. The project then changed and mutated during development, however, as Hanna-Barbera couldn't secure the rights to Jack Armstrong. Hence, they made Johnny Quest. Initially, though, they didn't want to give him a created by credit, but it was eventually capitulated. Going going a bit off track, this reminds me of the fact that Hanna-Barbera wanted to make a Doctor Who cartoon, but because they couldn't secure the rights to that, they decided to turn Fonzie into a time traveler. Sounds stupid coming out of my mouth, but we did talk about it in the video. Now, you're probably wondering about the budget of the show since it was so expensive to make. Well, the actual budget numbers for a typical episode of the show can't be easily found, but it should be recalled that Hanna-Barbera tried assertively to work on the cheap. Indeed, many of Hanna-Barbera's characters were designed in such a way that animating them would take less time, which, now that I think about it, all those Scooby-Doo knockoffs and ripoffs are starting to make more sense. To an extent. Speed Buggy. Notice how the main character kind of looks like Shaggy? And then one of the characters looks like a character from Funky Phantom. That's clever, actually. That's actually kind of clever. Most Hanna-Barbera characters are seen at a third-fourth of an angle, meaning they could be looking into the side or right at the camera, depending only on their eyes. Think of Fred Flintstone. This design ethos allowed for a type of limited animation that was cheaper and quicker to produce. It allowed Hanna-Barbera to stick to a weekly TV schedule, something most animation studios couldn't even do. Jonny Quest, in being more visually rich, likely took too much money to make and too much time to animate. Perhaps unable to keep up with Hanna-Barbera's rigors and budget, the show was canned. Of course, that isn't the end to Jonny Quest's tale, as his legacy goes on. Thanks to the endless reruns, Jonny Quest remained in the pop consciousness for years, and interest in the character remained high. Indeed, because in 1986, they tried to revive the character with the animated series, The New Adventures of Jonny Quest. Scott Menville played Jonny Quest this time. Who played him before? I didn't read that part, hold on. Tim Matheson played him before, but now they had this other dude. Sorry, I gotta go back. Okay. And they still got Don Messick to play Dr. Quest and the dog. This new series was originally intended to be a sequel series with a grown-up Jonny Quest as the main character, but the studio rejiggered it to a reboot. That version, however, only lasted 13 episodes. A decade later, in 1986, they tried one more time to, make another Jonny Quest cartoon called The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest. The previous show was called The New Adventures. Whatever. Which added even higher tech as well as an edgier tone to the young boy's adventures. Also, he was 14 in this show. Real Adventures was sharper and made use of high-tech computer animation, this time with J.D. Ross playing Johnny. It aired on Cartoon Network and was the most successful Jonny Quest show, lasting 52 episodes and getting 2 seasons. That's a record because the other 2 shows didn't even have that. There was supposed to be a live-action Jonny Quest movie. It's been stuck in development hell for years now. There were so many actors and directors attached to the project, but there's no script. There's no script at all. Nothing's been greenlit, so we'll just have to wait until we eventually one day get a Jonny Quest